Ever since Franklin D. Roosevelt coined the term in the 1930s, the first 100 days in office have become a yardstick to measure the accomplishments of US presidents and political leaders around the world. But how effective is the 100-day mark in judging their success? The first 100 days is just a tiny fraction of a 4-year US presidential term, but the idea that a lot can be achieved in a short period originated long before President Roosevelt.
So help me God.
Exiled French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte's escape from the island of Elba in 1815, return to power in Paris and subsequent defeat at the Battle of Waterloo, all in a period of under 4 months, is known as le 100 jours. However, it wasn't until the 20th century, when FDR was elected President of the United States, that the term became a political catchphrase. Roosevelt was elected at a time when the country faced severe challenges during the Great Depression. With unemployment at record levels, the urgent economic situation allowed FDR to achieve a remarkable amount in the first 100 days of his presidency. When he took office in 1933, the banks were on the verge of failure. In less than a week, Roosevelt convinced Congress to pass the Emergency Banking Act that effectively stabilized the financial system. While the bill was prepared during the previous administration, Roosevelt managed to roll out 14 other major pieces of legislation in his first 100 days, including a series of reforms that were part of his New Deal economic program. He also coined the term fireside chat by speaking directly to the public through radio broadcasts.
I want to tell you what has been done in the last few days.
Roosevelt's leadership style, along with the extraordinary speed of reform, cemented his popularity, setting the 100-day benchmark by which all future presidents would be measured. In his first 100 days, Roosevelt passed 76 bills into law, 23 more than his successor Harry Truman. Since then, no president has succeeded in passing more than 30, the closest being Donald Trump, who was responsible for 28 acts. In addition to his legislative success, FDR issued 99 executive orders, a vast number compared to subsequent presidents. As impressive as FDR's achievements were, political historians argue that the unique circumstances of the Great Depression made the speed and scale of his impact possible. The sense of urgency created by the country's economic freefall muted most political opposition. More recent presidents faced an increasingly partisan political landscape and a Congress with stronger subcommittees, which added a new layer of decision-making to the legislative process. Even though American politics has seen significant changes since the Great Depression, political analysts argue that the first 100 days is still a presidential honeymoon, during which they wield extra influence. According to data from the second half of the 20th century, US presidents fared better with Congress earlier rather than later in their inaugural year. With the exception of Lyndon Johnson and George H.W. Bush, bills that were supported by presidents passed more often than those considered later in their tenure. The percentage of votes from Congress in favour of the president's position on bills, motions and amendments during that time were on average significantly higher in the first 100 days than the rest of the year. One reason for this, according to political analysts, is that US presidents tend to be strategic in their support for bills likely to pass Congress, partly accounting for the perception of early-term success. There's also an argument that political leaders are most effective right after their election victory, when public opinion is demonstrably on their side, which may strengthen their hand when dealing with other lawmakers. However, the honeymoon period can be short, as was the case for French President Emmanuel Macron. Only a third of French people were satisfied with his presidency after 100 days, 10% lower even compared to his predecessor François Hollande, the most unpopular French president in polling history. In the private sector, a leader's actions at the start of a new job may also have a lasting impact. A survey of 143 human resources executives found that more than 70% agreed or strongly agreed that success or failure during the transition period is a strong predictor of overall success or failure in the job. According to some business experts, poor decisions can have an adverse effect on leaders' future working relationships, whereas early wins build trust in their vision. For politicians, early wins often mean passing laws, but is that the best indicator of a strong start to a leader's tenure? While Ronald Reagan only enacted 9 laws in his first 100 days, his fiercest critics commended him for effectively communicating goals which would define his presidency during the first 100 days. Conversely, John F. Kennedy passed 26 laws in his first 100 days in office, but the period was marred by the disastrous Bay of Pigs invasion 87 days into his presidency. The failed military action at the height of the Cold War was intended to overthrow Cuban dictator Fidel Castro, but instead heightened tensions with the USSR and culminated culminated in the Cuban Missile Crisis. In fact, Kennedy tried to lower expectations for his first 100 days during his inauguration speech.
All this will not be finished in the first 100 days, nor will it be finished in the first 1,000 days, nor in the life of this administration.
Despite the disastrous Bay of Pigs invasion, JFK's accomplishments have been deemed favourable in comparison with his immediate predecessors Dwight Eisenhower and Harry Truman. Although the first 100 days is an arbitrary deadline, part of its continued relevance is in politicians' use of pre-election promises to hook voters. While on the campaign trail, Trump unveiled a 100-day action plan called Contract with the American Voter. But as the deadline for its completion approached the following year, he called the 100 days a ridiculous standard. The first 100 days catchphrase has caught on internationally too. Imran Khan successfully campaigned to become Prime Minister of Pakistan on a 100 days agenda in the country's general election in 2018. Although he failed to make significant headway on his promises. In the UK, Boris Johnson's Conservative Party also published a 100-day plan in the week before the 2019 general election. Although Johnson managed to fulfil most of these promises, his rosy outlook for 2020 was swiftly derailed by the coronavirus pandemic. The first 100 days may be an effective political campaign slogan, but is it a benchmark that matters? For every US president, the ghost of Roosevelt looms large, although his achievements occurred in unique circumstances. History has also shown that a leader's early actions do not necessarily make or break their presidency, and plans can quickly be overturned by events beyond their control. But a successful first 100 days can build momentum, personal credibility, and political capital, which any politician would be grateful for. Hi guys, thanks for watching our video. We'd love for you to subscribe to the channel, but before you do that, are there any political leaders that I haven't mentioned in the video that have had a remarkable first 100 days, whether good or bad? Comment below the video to let us know, and we'll see you next time.